Ms. Torres.
I'm just not shocked at what I'm hearing, from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. When I first got to Congress, I served in a committee where the chairman constantly referred to me as a man. It was always Mr. Torres. Nobody stood up for me and said, have some respect. And it wasn't until I finally got tired of having to say, I'm Mrs. Torres, that I approached him coming out of an elevator and said, Chairman, respectfully, I identify as a woman. So unless you're going to create a facility where I can use a transgender bathroom because you keep referring to me as a man, please refer to me as Mrs. Torres. From that day on, he continued to refer to me as not Congresswoman Torres, not Mrs. Torres, but Norma. In this very committee, I was going to ask questions. It was my turn to ask questions of a witness that had come forward. But the majority at the time thought it was inappropriate for me to ask questions as a member of this committee, of this specific witness, and decided to take a break, a recess, and go over into that room, all males, Republicans, and try to figure out a way around shutting me down from being able to ask the question. And it wasn't until I angrily pointed to the crowd, you see what the men do to women in this building. I didn't realize that there were several constituents of that chairman sitting in the audience. The group immediately came out and invited me in. Ultimately, it was decided that I could not proceed. In a committee hearing, a colleague was very upset about my comments and made this motion as if he was going to shoot me. Nobody stood up for me. It's unfortunately that in this generation, women still have to defend themselves against these biases. If they're not biases, then what is it? And how much time do Republicans need in order to do something about a threat, a violent threat against one of your colleagues? So let me just ask you, how much more time do you need to make a decision on what to do about your colleague? How much time do you need?
Well, I would tell you, as I've been a victim as well, and I would say any member of Congress that feels threatened should contact law enforcement immediately. And I think what we were even talking about here today should have been an immediate referral of this tape. If people feel threatened, they file complaints, they go to law enforcement, and they immediately start investigations. We don't even do that on the Ethics Committee.
So I'll ask you the question again, since you were not able to respond to me. Maybe you didn't understand. How much time do you need to bring forward a complaint against your colleague for the comments that he made, the threats that he made? How much time do you need?
Well, I would again say any member that feels threatened can immediately go to law enforcement and should. That is what we do in the House.
Okay, so do you not see that post, that image, those images as a threat of violence against one of your female colleagues?
I'll respond for the third time. Any member that
To
feels
you, I'm
threatened-
asking if you, personally, you are a member, you are a female member, you are my colleague who I
I've
respect.
been a victim before, and I've gone to law enforcement and repeated it and reported it immediately.
This is our workplace. Is this behavior acceptable to you in the workplace?
If I ever felt threatened, I'd go immediately to law enforcement, and I have, and that's exactly what the protocol has been.
I understand the protocol. Do you believe that this is a threat against one of your colleagues or not?
If I feel threatened,
Okay.
I'd go directly to law enforcement.
So let me apologize to you because I know that this is very, very difficult place for you to be in. If I made you feel uncomfortable, I apologize. But this is a very uncomfortable place for us to be in. As members of the Rules Committee and as a chairman of the Ethics Committee, ultimately, I think the Republican Party, all of you, need to think very long and hard about what you stand for. What do you stand for? Do you stand for violence against women? Or do you stand against it? Do you want to stand for violence against our democracy? Or do you stand against it? Do you stand for racism? Or do you stand against it? Unfortunately, the silence is a horrible response. I wish it was not the response that we deserve, that this capital deserves, that our democracy, that our constituents deserve. We're meeting to censure an individual that is causing great harm to one of our colleagues. A colleague that has been on the front lines of attacks by other employees, federal employees, like the CBP, the Border Patrol agents, when we visited El Paso. You remember that? I'm sorry that we are where we are, and I'm sorry that you cannot answer very simple questions, whether you stand for violence against your colleagues or not. I'm sorry that there are 13 Republicans that were so courageous to vote on a bill to benefit their constituents are now having to lose their positions in their committees, because that's been the priority for this Republican group.
I understand, and I'm sorry that we're not following the procedures set in this House of how to even handle this case, to be notified of it right before I walked in this room and having a vote set up tomorrow that we haven't even discussed. I'm sorry about that.
The procedure of this House is to have decency and common courtesy and a nonviolent work environment, not just for our employees, but for our colleagues.
And I would say common courtesy hasn't even been extended to me as the ranking member.
And I'm sorry for that. I know that you're in a very difficult position. I realize that, and I'm sorry if my questions to you made you uncomfortable. And I